The measure of a Christian is not in the height of his grasp, but rather the depth of his love. That quote comes from Clarence Jordan, a most interesting person who lived for the most part in the 20th century, died in the late 70s. And the way that I've been feeling lately made me turn to him this week. Because Clarence Jordan is a tremendous person of vision. He's a person that brings joy and a sense of hope in everything that he encountered and everything that he wrote. In many, many ways, he was an interesting contradiction in terms. He was, on the one hand, a simple farmer, but also managed to study ancient Greek language so that he could go into the New Testament and especially the Gospels. Eventually, just a little before I got to the seminary, he published a book called The Cotton Patch New Testament. In it, he changed the focus from Jerusalem, the Roman Empire, places that you can only hear about unless you go to the Holy Land and witness them, like Capernaum and Tyre and Sidon and Jerusalem and Bethlehem, Nazareth, the Sea of Galilee. And the people, the high priests, Annas and Caiaphas and Herod and so on and so forth, he changed it all into contemporary places that people would understand. And because he was a simple farmer from Georgia, that's hence the term, the Cotton Patch. But his point was that we need to all do that. You know, not Georgia, not Glen Rock, not, Istanbul, wherever you are, whatever time you live, so that the New Testament can begin to come alive. One time when he was in his life, he was in trouble with the law, but only on some trumped-up charges. And he called on his brother Robert, who was an attorney, but he refused to deal with him or the case because it was too political. Well, Clarence couldn't believe it, and he said to his brother that, we studied and committed our lives to Jesus Christ. And Robert said to him that he followed Jesus, but only to a point. He went with him to the cross, but refused to be on the cross with him. Clarence looked his brother in the eye and he said to him, Robert, you're not a follower of Jesus, just an admirer. Over the years, I look back and have been reflecting, and like I said, there's a lot of negativity, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, all kinds of things that are beginning to, different days, it gets different people. And I think about my own life, and I think about how over the years, without knowing it, without trying to do it, but I think that I have to say that I think I slipped into a similar position. I spoke the truth, but oftentimes would skate around the really tough issues, the things that people don't want to hear. But that's not what Jesus needs. Nor does the world, nor our country, nor our town, nor our parish, etc., etc., etc. Jordan said, fear is the polio of the soul, which keeps us from walking by faith. I spoke about fear last week, and the obvious reference to last week's gospel. But there's a great deal of fear underlying what Jesus speaks about in today's gospel. It's so provocative. Did you hear it? Do you believe it? Do you think that it's Jesus being like a little exaggerated, or does he mean it? He begins by saying, whoever loves his father, his mother, his daughter, or son more than God is not worthy. Now, who does that? How many people could it really honestly say that's what they do? Jesus Christ asks us today to take up our own crosses. And most of the time in life, that's very individual, very different. Different families, different things going on. But we all share a cross right now. And Jesus wants us to follow him. He even says, whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will find it. In other words, if we're so caught up in self, we begin to lose the true focus of who we are and how we were made and what we were made for. And so Jesus Christ asks us by the words of this gospel to make a difference. He doesn't need admirers. He's got plenty of those. He wants us to look out and see what has to be done. Don't talk about it. Do it. Unfortunately, the world that we live in today is so political and so, disjointed. We politicize everything. Even wearing masks have come down to politics. Yeah, maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's not something we're used to. But again, it obviously, we don't even know how much of an effect it has, but we know that it's better than the alternative. We have to look outward. Our mask is for one another. Are we willing to do things for one another? When we took a poll of a couple of years ago at the ministry fair, and the overwhelming response came back is that people were looking for community. Well, you don't really look for a community, you become a community. And a community is about people who are there for one another. And so, I think the sadness for me is not in the pandemic as much as I start to see as we begin to just have a breath. We don't even know how long a time this will be, but we know that if we're not careful, we'll be back into the midst of the horrible numbers and the crisis that was not with us very long ago. But so many times it's already been, what do I need? What do I want? And it can't be that way. If we don't learn anything from this, then we really are a sorry lot. I think about some of the other things going on now. The fact that there has to be a movement called Black Lives Matter is, in many, many ways, a very sad commentary on our society. Shouldn't have to say that. Shouldn't have to think about that. Because every single person that God made matters. And what are we doing about it? I laugh at the fact that, some of these marches happen. What does that mean? Really? Does it make people feel better about themselves because they can say they walked 4 blocks carrying a sign? That's not the way to change the world. That's not the way to change society. It's attitude, it's approach, it's who we are. It can't be gestures. It has to be significant. I think, that we have to be careful, because hear what Jesus said in the gospel today. He talks about all these things. God is not interested in anything but our caring and loving one another. He talks about all the things that we can do. He talks about giving a small cup of water to somebody who needs it. Jordan is quoted as saying that the poor don't need social workers, they need co-workers. And thus he was credited as one of the founders of Habitat for Humanity. And if you understand how that charity works, one of the things that it doesn't just build houses because, we're better and we can build a house for somebody who's poor. Everybody's building, including the people who move into those houses. They have a stake, sweat equity. They work side by side with the people who came to help. And that's a great microcosm for the way that we should operate with all things. And so we have to move away from the self and to the other. We have to move away from the from the fear to the hope and to the faith. We can't let this tragedy define us. As a matter of fact, it should be the opposite. We take charge. And I have to say, even in my difficulty and my sadness and my kind of angst, there's a lot of good news, because there's also a lot of good people stepping up. Even right here in the parish. We need that. The world needs that. Our own parish needs that. And the question is, will you join us? We have the prescription. We hear it every week. It's called the gospel. Do we listen to it and then excuse ourselves? Or do we believe in our heart of hearts that those words are meant for us? Because in the end, Christ doesn't need admirers, but true followers.